You wake to the sound of sandals slapping damp wood and low chanting drifting over the water. When you emerge from your shelter, blinking at the morning mist, a procession of white-robed priests is already gliding past your chinampa in a long canoe. They don't look at you. They're focused on the city. On the towering pyramids silhouetted in the distance. And, most likely, on their next request for someone's still beating heart. You sigh and stretch. Another day in paradise, floating between squash blossoms and state-sponsored sacrifice. Today, you've agreed to help a neighbor finish repairing a chinampa boundary, and as you paddle over, you think about the strange coexistence of daily farm life and empire-building power plays. Because here's the thing. This isn't just a farming society. It's a society ruled by priests and warriors. By omens and calendars. By ritual blood and tribute corn. And sometimes, they clash. Your neighbor's Tapatsan is already waist-deep in the shallows, stacking reeds and guiding a young willow into place. He grunts a greeting and offers you a bundle of twine. You begin lashing a reed mat to the base of the chinampa. It's meditative work, the kind that doesn't require talking. Just the occasional grunt of hold this or tighter. Eventually, he breaks the silence. Priests came by again, he says, almost casually. Told my cousin he'd been chosen for the maze dance. You raise an eyebrow. That's priest code 4, we need someone to dress in feathers and potentially not come back. You both nod. What else is there to say? This is the balance of the Aztec world. Farmers like you and Tapatsan grow the food. Priests like the ones in the canoe ask for blood to keep the sun rising. Both believe they're feeding the gods. Historians still debate how common sacrifice actually was. Was it a daily occurrence? A festival-only event? Were volunteers truly willing, or just very convinced? The truth is probably muddier than the lake. But what's certain is this, the Chinamperos, those who worked the floating gardens, kept the system alive. They weren't the ones performing sacrifices, but they fed the ones who did. They brought chilies and maize and cacao to the temples. They grew the flowers for the altars. They were the quiet power behind the ritual spectacle. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow and take a long sip of cool water mixed with lime and honey. Tapatsan sits beside you on a stone, staring out across the canal. Sometimes, he says, I think the corn is smarter than all of us. You nod. It definitely screams less. You both chuckle, and for a moment, the looming pressure of empire fades. The chinampa, after all, doesn't care about politics. It wants compost, sun, and a gentle hand. Still, as you help repair the edge, you can't ignore how interconnected everything is. Tribute lists from the capital specify how many years of maize must be delivered by when. Certain chinampas are marked with colored flags, signaling which crops are due for the palace kitchens. There's a quota. There's always a quota. You've heard stories of messengers arriving at dawn to collect bundles of amaranth. Of guards waiting at the edge of a family plot while a mother frantically gathers herbs before the sun rises. And if the tribute doesn't arrive? The consequences might not be a knife on a pyramid, but they could mean losing your plot. Or your rights to fish a certain canal. Or simply, being noticed. So farmers comply. Not because they're cowards, but because they know how fragile balance can be. Still, there are small rebellions. Tapatsan tells you of a cousin who planted wildflowers instead of chilies on a tribute chinampa, said it was an accident. The officials weren't pleased, but the butterflies were. You finish the repair work and return to your own plot by midday. The sun is high. Your squash leaves are wide and shaded, hiding the blooms like secrets. You walk between the rows, checking for pests, damage, or gifts left by the birds. Near the beans, you spot something new, a small stone figure tucked under the vines. It's shaped like a rabbit, with oversized ears and one eye chipped away. You didn't place it there. Someone has left an offering. Or a warning. Or maybe just a joke. You leave it be. In the distance, you hear drums. The kind that echo through stone and water. A festival is beginning. You picture the plaza, feathers, chants, flowers, dancers spinning under clouds of incense. The maize goddess, Chicumcodal, will be honored today. You smile, knowing part of her feast came from your garden. Your squash, your beans, your hands. You don't need a priest to tell you that's sacred. Later, as the sky turns gold, you paddle slowly through the canal and past the temple district. From the water, the pyramid looks surreal, less like a building. More like a jagged tooth pushing through the earth. People gather on its steps, watching the sky. You don't stop. You return to your chinampa, light a small fire, and roast a few ears of corn in silence. As the flames crackle, you think about power, not the kind shouted from stone platforms, but the kind that grows quietly beneath your feet. In roots. In water. In the soft strength of mud and patience. You turn the corn, blow on it, and take a bite. The gods may feast in palaces, but tonight, you dine like royalty. The moon hangs low and full, reflected in a dozen trembling ripples across the dark canal. You lie in your hammock, strung between two willows on your chinampa. Listening to the night, the occasional splash of a fish, the soft whisper of reeds, the distant hoot of an owl. But you don't sleep just yet. Because something is moving out there. You sit up slowly, eyes scanning the shadows along the water's edge. A rustle near your chiles. A splash by your compost pile. And then, a low croak. Frogs. Again. You step down from the hammock, feet bare and cool on the damp soil. The moonlight glints off the surface of the water, illuminating tiny shapes hopping between squash vines. One looks up at you, entirely unbothered, as if to say, "Good evening. I live here too." Which, frankly, is fair. The chinampas are not exclusive real estate. You share them with birds, insects, snakes, ducks, and yes, frogs. So many frogs. Some of them are helpful, eating the beetles and bugs that chew your crops. Others are loud. Especially the ones that croak in rhythm, like an off-key choir warming up. It's oddly endearing. Until you're trying to sleep. You grab a stick and walk toward your marigolds, just in time to catch a flash of movement. A long, low form. Slinking along the edge. You freeze. It's no frog. It's a coati, a curious, long-nosed creature that looks like someone designed a raccoon during a fever dream. It sniffs your compost pile, shuffles your reeds, and then clumsily tips over a bowl of old tamales. You sigh. That was your midnight snack. Historians still argue over how many creatures made the chinampas home in the height of the Aztec Empire. But the biodiversity was undeniable. These floating gardens weren't monocultures, they were ecosystems. Living networks of soil, water, plants, and animals. And not all the animals were cute. Tepotson once told you of a time he saw a jaguar, yes. A real one, swimming across a canal in the dead of night. He swore it growled at his canoe before disappearing into the lilies. You weren't sure whether to believe him. Then again, you've seen some pretty strange things out here. Like the time a snake curled up inside your sandal. Or the hawk that stole a whole tortilla right out of your hand. The chinampas don't just support crops. They support life. Wild, uninvited, utterly unconcerned with your planting schedule. Even the insects are part of the dance. Dragonflies skim the surface of the canals, hunting mosquitoes with acrobatic grace. Ants build tunnels in the edges of your chinampa, some of which you suspect are older than you. Bees hover around your morning glories, so busy they barely notice when you walk through. And of course, ducks. You hear them now, muttering darkly to one another somewhere nearby. They're plotting. You just know it. In daylight, they're adorable. Quacking, waddling, fluttering through your squash vines like guests at a very muddy tea party. At night? They become marauders. Crop-raiding shadows with webbed feet and no sense of personal boundaries. You once woke to find an entire chili bush flattened under the duck huddle. They'd apparently used it as a pillow. A spicy, unforgivable pillow. You've tried tricks. Hanging wind chimes. Planting strong-smelling herbs. Even shouting. They blink at you, unimpressed, then go back to chewing. Still, it's hard to be mad. They're part of the system. They eat pests. They drop, well, fertilizer. And sometimes they bring friends. Like the time a turtle showed up. You remember that morning vividly. You stepped out to check your corn and there it was, smack in the middle of your bean patch. It stared at you. You stared back. Then it slowly turned, vanished into the canal. And left you wondering if you'd imagined the whole thing. You hadn't. Tapotsin's daughter swore she saw it too. And she named it Quatli, after a warrior. Some animals were more useful. Dogs, for example. Aztecs bred a small, hairless breed called the Zoloitzcuintli Zolos, for short. Some were pets. Some were sacred. Some, well, let's just say they were also protein. Your neighbor has one. It sleeps beside the chili patch and growls at birds that come too close. You've seen it chase a heron once. The heron won. Barely. You settle back into your hammock, listening now not for threats, but for stories. Every splash tells you something. That was a fish, startled by your coati friend. That was a duck arguing over a favored nesting spot. That long sigh? Probably the wind. Probably. You think about the balance. About how the Chinampas were never about domination, but coexistence. The Aztecs didn't wall off nature. They wove it into their daily life. They accepted the frogs, the coatis, even the jaguar rumors. And in doing so, they created something rare, a farm that breathes. That buzzes. That sings at night with the lullabies of wings and croaks and ripples. You let the hammock sway gently as your eyes grow heavier. Somewhere nearby, a frog starts singing again badly, bravely. A duck mutters. Something snuffles your compost one last time. And you smile. Because out here, in this floating garden, nothing is truly quiet. But it's peaceful. You awaken to the sound of wind pushing through the reeds, and the unmistakable gurgle of water rising where it shouldn't be. You sit up fast. The air is thick. Humid, electric. Gray clouds hang low, heavy with something unsaid. And there's that sound again, the slap of waves against the Chinampa's edge, stronger now. More insistent. You pull on your sandals and step outside just as the first fat drop hits your forehead. It's here. The rainy season. And she's in a mood. Within moments, the drizzle becomes a downpour. Not a polite English drizzle or a sudden desert squall, this is the lake's version of a personality crisis. The rain hammers the Chinampa like it's owed money, and the canals churn with mud and broken twigs. You grab your reed mat and cover the seedlings. The corn can take it. The squash doesn't mind. But your amaranth? She's sensitive. Your neighbor shouts something across the canal, but the wind grabs his words and hurls them into the water. You both shrug and get back to work. Communication can wait. Water control cannot. Because this is the truth nobody puts in the romantic poems, for all their elegance, Chinampas flood. A lot. And when they do, it's both beautiful and mildly terrifying. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs had an advanced drainage strategy or if they just adapted quickly when things got soggy. The answer seems to be both. Channels were designed to funnel overflow. Reservoirs were dug. Spillways guided water away from crops. But sometimes you just got wet. You paddle around the perimeter of your plot, inspecting the edges. The willow trees are holding, barely. Their roots are dark with saturation, but firm. The woven reed barriers have started to sag. Though, and one section near the compost pile has already split. You fix it on instinct, jamming in extra reeds and weighting the bottom with stones. Your fingers are slippery. Your back is soaked, but the work is urgent. If that section collapses, the whole corner of your Chinampa might drift away. And unlike a broken vase or a spoiled squash, You can't just replace part of your farm. You glance toward the city and see a shimmer of movement. Canoes moving quickly, hoods pulled tight. People ferrying emergency baskets, tying down rooftops, anchoring anything that floats too freely. Tenochtitlan may be a city of canals, but even it isn't immune to a tantrum from the sky. You remember stories of the Great Flood of 1449, when torrential rains swelled the lakes and drowned entire neighborhoods. Thousands lost their homes. Even the emperor couldn't stop the waters. After that, massive dikes and levees were built, ingenious systems to hold back the water gods. They worked, mostly. Today feels like one of those days where mostly isn't quite enough. By midday, you're drenched, mud-slicked, and panting. The rain has softened, but the damage is done. Some of your herbs have floated away. Your chili patch looks more like a stew. But the willows still stand. And so do you. You tie your canoe tighter and make one final circuit. Some floating flower plots have drifted slightly, their anchors loosening in the softened muck. You nudge one back into place, murmur a half-prayer, and leave a sprig of marigold tucked into the reeds. Not to ward off gods. Just to say, we're still here. And then, like a petulant child who's cried herself out, the storm ends. Just like that. The clouds crack apart. A reluctant sun peers through. And the lake sighs. You sit on a log, dripping, watching steam rise from the soil. Birds reappear, shaking feathers. A turtle clambers onto a rock like nothing happened. Somewhere. A child is already paddling back toward a chinampa, laughing at the sheer absurdity of it all. You laugh too. Because here's the thing, the chinampa doesn't break. It bends. It absorbs. It waits. You, too, are learning this rhythm. The give and take. The float. The bounce back. You stand, stretch your sore arms, and squish your way back across the garden. The corn is leaning but intact. The beans, muddied but defiant. Your willow trees? Glorious. You whisper a thank you to them. Out loud. That night, you light a small fire with dry twigs saved under your mat. You roast a soggy ear of corn. It tastes like smoke and triumph. Rain might flood the chinampas. But it never drowns the spirit that built them. The morning after the storm, everything smells new. Clean. Almost too clean, like the lake itself was scrubbed with soap made from clouds and thunder. You step out onto the chinampa. And the mud squishes under your feet like warm pudding. The plants are still glistening, drops of water clinging to every leaf. Your beans have perked up overnight. Grateful for the drenching. The squash leaves, always dramatic, are splayed wide like sunbathers finally getting their fix. Even your marigolds seem smug, as if they knew all along the storm would pass. You kneel to resecure a few rows, nothing major. A few leaning stalks, some puddled furrows. Easy work. But then you notice something strange near the corner of your plot. A circle. Pressed deep into the soil. At first you think it's an animal track. Then you realize it's too perfect. Too deliberate. Someone has left a marker. You crouch beside it and run your fingers over the rim. It's a spiral, made by a stick or a finger, etched into the soft surface during the rain. No words. No symbols. Just a spiral. You've seen something like this before, at a shrine during the harvest festival. A symbol of Tlaloc, the rain god. Or maybe a warning. Or maybe just a neighbor's child playing in the mud with metaphysical flair. You leave it be. Because in the chinampas, not everything makes sense. And not everything is supposed to. You turn back to your plants, and that's when you see it, a mushroom. Pale and firm, poking up between your herbs. Then another. Then 5. Your chinampa has decided to sprout fungi. Which is both delightful and mildly concerning. You pick one and sniff it. Earthy. Damp. Innocent looking. You're not going to eat it, you're curious, not reckless, but the sight of mushrooms reminds you, your chinampa is a living thing. And sometimes it grows what it wants. Fungi were a part of Aztec life too. Not just as food. Some had spiritual significance, used in rituals, visions, and offerings. Others were simply medicinal. And some could make you see gods whether you were invited or not. You dig gently around the mushroom's base, checking for rot. Your soil is fine. Maybe the extra moisture just woke something up. You decide to let them grow. Carefully. A bit later, you paddle over to Tapatson's plot. He's already awake, cleaning out his compost pit, humming a tune that might be a lullaby or a threat to crows. You tell him about the mushrooms. He nods solemnly, then tells you his sister once ate a dream fungus and spent an entire day arguing with a tree she thought was her grandmother. He doesn't recommend repeating the experience. You return with a few willow cuttings and spend the morning reinforcing the storm-weakened corners of your chinampa. It's satisfying work, low pressure, high reward. You tie the cuttings in with fresh reeds, poke them deep into the edges, and step back to watch the trees settle into their new homes. By midday, your chinampa looks restored. Maybe even stronger. The storm was rough, but the structure held. You paddle slowly around the perimeter, inspecting the canals. And that's when you find it. A drifting shrine. No bigger than a basket lid. Floating slowly along the canal. Inside, flower petals, a slice of fruit, a bundle of herbs tied with dyed string. And a tiny figure made from maize dough. A doll. You scoop it from the water and hold it gently. Someone made this. Someone released it. Offerings like this are common during the rainy season, meant for Tlaloc, for Calcayatlicue the water goddess, or simply for the lake itself. Gifts to say thank you or please don't drown my garden again. You hesitate, then paddle to a patch of lilies and set the offering there, letting it continue its journey. The chinampa system isn't just engineering. It's ritual ecology. Every act, planting, pruning, paddling, is layered with meaning. It feeds the body, but it also feeds the soul. You head home, where your hammock waits. On the way, you pick a few fresh chilies, a handful of epazote, and very carefully, 2 of the mushrooms. Not for eating. Just for watching. You boil a simple broth on your little clay stove. Drop in the herbs. Sip slowly. The sky darkens again, not with storm, but with twilight. The lake turns silver. And your chinampa, that living, floating patch of stubborn green, exhales. You feel it beneath you, relaxed now, fed, secured. The willows sway. The water laps. The fungi bloom. And somewhere behind it all, just beyond the mist and the logic of farming, the gods smile, if only for tonight. The lake is quiet again. Not silent, never truly silent, but content. As you step barefoot across your chinampa the next morning, the ground feels spongy but firm. Like it's forgiven yesterday's storm. Everything smells of wet earth and growing things. And something else, too. Smoke. You pause, sniff the air, and catch the faint scent of roasting maize. And damp wood. Somewhere nearby, someone is making breakfast. And suddenly, you're very aware of how empty your own stomach is. Today's work begins not with mud or reeds, but with cooking, the kind that only works when your ingredients come from 10 feet away, still muddy, still humming with lake life. You gather a basket, chilies, amaranth leaves, a few slender green tomatoes, and a handful of wild garlic. The Aztecs didn't separate food from farming. If you grew it, you knew how to cook it. If you ate it, you understood what it took to bring it out of the water and into the fire. You squat beside your tiny clay hearth, tucked beneath the willow for shade, and light a small flame with a handful of dried reeds and the edge of a corn husk. Smoke curls upward in lazy loops, and soon the scent of toasted corn fills your patch of the world. You press dough between your palms, forming imperfect discs of maize masa. Tortillas. Yours are not symmetrical, but the chinampa doesn't judge. While they cook, you crush chilies and garlic together on your metate, a flat grinding stone used by generations of sore-backed chefs. You add a splash of lake water and mash until your fingers sting and your nose runs. That's how you know it's good. You fold the mixture into a fresh tortilla and take a bite. It is, as always, astonishing. Spicy, smoky, green. The taste of sweat and sunrise. You eat in silence, watching the willows shift. This is Chinampa cuisine, hyperlocal, deeply personal, and incredibly efficient. Historians still marvel at how diverse the Aztec diet was. Maize was the foundation. Of course, but it was never alone. Squash, beans, chilies, amaranth, tomatoes, avocado, cactus pads, wild greens, dozens of ingredients, all grown within paddling distance. Add in lake fish, frogs, waterfowl, and insects, and you had a menu fit for gods and gardeners alike. Even the drinks were homegrown, atol, a warm maize beverage. Chili cacao elixirs, fermented pulque, and something called pozole, which is basically energy gruel but somehow tasty. And every meal, every bite, reinforced the same truth: you are part of this place. You grow what you eat. You eat what you grow. No middleman. No mystery. After breakfast, you set out to help an elder prepare a food offering for an upcoming celebration, a quiet affair meant to honor the maize spirit. No sacrifices. No feathers, no booming drums. Just food, laid out beautifully. You bring squash blossoms, tied into a garland. The elder roasts beans with episode and grinds amaranth into a sweet, sticky paste. You lay it all out on a wide reed mat, decorating the edge with marigolds and crushed chili. It smells like rain and celebration. You ask her if this food is only for spirits. She smirks. If the spirits don't show up, we eat it anyway. Fair enough. Later, you visit Tapatsan, who is experimenting with a reed-woven floating griddle. He's laced clay shards into the weave and set a fire basin atop it. He's cooking tamales, on the lake. You ask if it's safe. He shrugs. Only if I don't flip the canoe. You both laugh. His tamales are good dense with pumpkin seeds and mole, wrapped in banana leaves instead of maize husks for extra softness. You make a trade. 2 tamales for your last fresh chilies. Deal. That night, as stars blink into being, you return to your chinampa full and slightly smoky. You light a small cooking fire, not to eat again, but because the flame feels like company. You roast one final ear of corn, slow and careful, and eat it with nothing on it at all. Just fire and plant. Sweet and charred. Enough. And as you chew, you realize something quietly profound: this isn't survival food. This is comfort food. It's home-cooked in the truest sense, grown, prepared, and eaten within arm's reach of your hammock. You pat your belly, sigh, and stretch out beneath the willow. Let the priests have their gold. Let the warriors swing their obsidian swords. Here, among the floating gardens, you've got tortillas, chilies, and a very full moon. What else could you possibly need? You wake with sunlight on your face and the distant sound of laughter carried on the breeze. It's not market day. It's not a festival. No priests in feathers. No duck drama. Just laughter, drifting across the water like a feather that forgot it was supposed to fall. You sit up and realize it's coming from the next canal over, where a group of women and girls are gathering reeds, bundled at the waist, up to their knees in water, hair wrapped in bright scarves. Every few minutes, one of them tosses a joke into the group and laughter bursts like a ripple. You paddle over slowly, not to intrude, but to watch. This is reed day. Every few weeks, Chinaparos harvest tulip, a tall, buoyant plant that grows at the lake's edge. It's used for mats, baskets, seats, fencing, and sometimes even as filler in cradles. Today, the women are gathering it for thatching a new family shelter and weaving fresh pitates, sleeping mats. They work in rhythm, voices lilting, hands practiced. One woman shows her daughter how to strip the outer reeds clean, smoothing them down with her palm, then tying bundles tight at one end. She doesn't scold. She sings. You offer to help. They accept. You wade into the water, cool and soft around your knees, and begin cutting reeds near the base with a curved obsidian blade. It's slow work but satisfying. The reeds slice cleanly, with a soft hiss. You stack them on a floating bundle tied to your waist like a raft. Some reeds snap. Some float away. The youngest child dives after them, squealing with delight. She resurfaces holding 3 reeds and a frog, then proudly adds all 4 to her pile. Historians still argue whether reed harvesting was gendered labor or a shared task. The reality seems, once again, fluid. Out here, if you can carry it, you're welcome to help. If you can weave, even better. Back on shore, the women lay the reeds in the sun to dry, overlapping them like fish scales. The scent is green and sweet, almost grassy. A toddler toddles through the piles, laughing, arms outstretched. No one stops her. The reeds will survive. You sit beside one of the women, her name is Yolittle, and she shows you how to begin a weave. Over, under, twist, pull. Your hands are too slow, your line's crooked. She chuckles and fixes your first row. You weave like a turtle, she says. I'm faster underwater, you reply. She laughs again and ties off her section, then begins another. Her fingers move like memory, she's done this since before. She could spell her name. Which, she reminds you, is irrelevant anyway, since names are carried in the heart, not written in symbols. You help stack finished mats into a canoe. The bundles are light but bulky, and they smell like lake water and sunlight. The mats will become many things, floors, beds, even temporary roofs for travel shelters. And some, woven more tightly, will serve as canoe seats, or linings for reed baskets used to carry maize and beans. One woman brings out a finished basket, shaped like a turtle's back. She pats it proudly. For corn, she says. And for frogs. But not at the same time. You all eat together at midday, fresh tortillas with roasted chilies, mashed avocado, and a sweet tamal filled with squash and honey. You sip atol from gourd cups and let the sun dry your wet trousers. It's not a feast. It's a moment. The kind the Chinampas offer freely when you stop long enough to listen. After lunch, Yolittle's mother begins a soft chant while tying the last reed bundle. It's not for show. Not even really for the gods. Just an old habit, words meant to bless the work, to settle the hands. The girl beside her joins in, voice shy. Unsure. It doesn't matter. The mat still weaves itself beneath their fingers. You return to your own Chinampa in the late afternoon, a bundle of reeds balanced across your shoulders. Your skin warm and aching. You sit at the edge and begin to weave. Poorly, at first. One section warps, and the tension goes slack. You try again. Over, under, twist. Over, under, twist. You fall into rhythm. And somewhere, in the shadow of your willow, the mat begins to take shape. It will be lumpy. It will be uneven. It will be yours. As the sun sets, you stretch out the beginning of your mat beside the squash patch. It doesn't look like much. Yet. But you realize now that the Chinampa isn't just a place to plant things. It's a place to make things. With your hands. With your neighbors. With reeds and time and laughter echoing across the water. The morning light slices through the mist like a golden paddle, revealing your Chinampa in crisp, honey-colored detail. Everything glistens. The water is still. The reeds sway gently, and your lumpy reed mat, now mostly dry, rests proudly by the squash like a freshly shed snakeskin. You smile at it. It looks slightly less like a collapsed canoe today. It's a day for maintenance, the kind of slow, deliberate tasks that hold the entire Chinampa system together. Not planting, not harvesting, just quiet upkeep. The things no one notices unless they don't get done. You start with the canal edges, those narrow but essential channels between Chinampas that can become clogged with debris, algae, or the long, indecisive roots of overly enthusiastic willows. You slide into your canoe and paddle toward the bend behind your amaranth patch. As expected, there's buildup, floating sticks, clusters of duckweed, and what appears to be the remains of someone's reed hat drifting lazily in the current. You grab a hooked pole and begin to pull the debris free. The duckweed clumps together like soft green confetti, satisfying to gather. But the deeper roots are more stubborn, they twist in wind, clinging to mud and hiding eels and frogs that shoot away when disturbed. Historians still debate how often these small canal maintenance rituals happened. Some argue that chinampas were so well designed that little cleaning was required. Others believe daily care was essential, especially after storms. The truth, as usual, lies in your sore back and damp sleeves. You clear the blockage, and the water flows better already. The canal sighs, grateful. Next up, the walkways, those narrow paths of packed reeds and soil that connect your chinampa to others, or at least to the nearest shared dock. They're part bridge, part social corridor, part duck expressway. And today? They're sinking. You step carefully onto one, noting where the reeds have compacted into soggy depressions. The trick is knowing where to reinforce without sinking through the walkway. You find the weakest spots, pack in new bundles of reeds, and pat them down with a flat paddle. This isn't glamorous work. You will not be remembered for today. There will be no ballads sung about the day you replaced the walkway mat. But without this, nothing else works. You pause for a drink, chilled pulque from a gourd flask, and watch the canal for a moment. A heron lands silently nearby and regards you with what might be judgment. Or admiration. Or hunger. Birds are hard to read. You nod politely anyway. Later, you paddle to a neighboring chinampa to check on a shared water trap, a clever little structure made of reeds and woven mats designed to catch floating compost, trash, or the occasional adventurous turtle. It's full today. You and another farmer pull it in and empty the contents onto a compost heap. Within the mess, a gourd ladle, a child's sandal, several soggy maize husks, and a curious carved stone in the shape of a fish. You hold the fish up. Yours, you ask. The other farmer shrugs. Looks like it swam here on its own. You leave it on a stump, just in case it wants to return to wherever it came from. In the afternoon, you shift to tree care, specifically, the willows that anchor your garden. One of the younger ones has grown too low over the path, its branches sweeping canoes like an over-friendly doorman. You trim it gently, speaking softly as you cut. Not because it needs to hear you, but because you need to feel heard. The willow doesn't mind. You save the trimmings, they'll be woven into new barriers or dried for kindling. You notice a nest tucked high in one branch. 2 eggs. You back away quietly and decide that branch doesn't need trimming after all. There's also bank maintenance, the ever-slippery battle against erosion. You press new reeds into place, layer mud behind them, and secure the edge with willow twigs and thick watergrass. You build it not like a wall, but like a sponge, firm, but permeable. The lake must be allowed to breathe. This is where the real genius of the chinampa lies, not in dominance over nature, but in partnership. You don't conquer the lake. You cooperate with it. You lean back, wiping sweat from your brow with a muddy sleeve. Your chinampa doesn't look much different than it did this morning. But it feels stronger, tidier, more itself. And somehow, so do you. At sunset, you light a small fire and place the carved fish stone beside it. You roast a tamale, sprinkle it with crushed herbs, and sit on your lopsided reed mat, listening to the lake. The heron is still there. A canoe glides silently past. And the sky turns pink and gold, mirrored perfectly in the water around your little garden. You didn't plant a thing today. You didn't harvest a single chile. But you held the world together in quiet ways no one sees. And here, on the chinampa, that's more than enough. The morning fog hangs lower than usual, clinging to the surface of the water like it's not quite ready to let go of the night. Your breath puffs visibly in front of you as you step into the canoe. Paddle in hand, eyes on the shifting curtain of mist. Today, you're off to visit the medicine chinampa. Not every floating garden grows food. Some, like the one you're paddling toward now, are devoted entirely to healing plants, a fragrant, mysterious patch of green where rows aren't so strict, and every leaf seems to have a story. The mist parts slowly as you glide closer. There it is, tucked at the edge of a cluster of smaller plots, surrounded by willows so tall they look like sentinels. The garden itself hums with bees, even this early. Birds flit from flower to flower, and the air smells like crushed herbs, cool stone, and something minty. You tie off your canoe and step onto the Chinampa, greeted by the soft voice of Tia Xochitl, a healer, midwife, herbalist, and local oracle when she's in the mood. She wears her hair in 2 thick braids and walks barefoot, her toes black with earth. She smiles when she sees you, then immediately points at your elbow. Too much paddling. Sore, yes? You blink. How did she? She hands you a bundle of matlalan, a fuzzy green leaf used for inflammation, and tells you to crush it. Mix it with ash, and press it into a warm cloth. You haven't said a word yet. Historians still debate how formal Aztec medicine was. There were trained healers and medical texts, yes, but much of the knowledge was experiential, passed through generations by word. By touch, by smell. Tia Xochitl's Chinampa holds it all. You walk with her slowly, the rows uneven, the plants organized not by shape or height, but by purpose. She shows you Tlalquequetzal, used for stomach aches and dreams. Then Iwatzio, a delicate vine that she says helps with grief. Next to it, rows of copal flowers. Sticky with resin, used to calm spirits or summon them. You pause beside a bush thick with purple berries. Poison, you ask. She shrugs. Medicine, if you know how. Poison, if you guess. Noted. She leads you to a stone mortar set into the earth. Stained from years of grinding. Today she's preparing a tea to soothe a neighbor's sore throat, yaloxyquil, or heart flower, steeped with lime peel and a dash of chile. You offer to help, and she nods. You crush the petals, your fingers slick with their juice. The scent is floral, yes, but also grounding, like crushed wood in sunlight. You add the water slowly, stirring with a carved stick, while she hums something ancient and unhurried. Then she wraps a bit of Tezcatlipocan, a moss-like growth scraped from wet tree trunks, and hands it to you. For your dreams, she says. You ask what it does. She smiles. Depends on the dream. The day stretches on, filled with tiny tasks, replanting roots, tying bundles of drying herbs, sorting seeds by scent. At one point, she holds up 2 nearly identical leaves and asks which one belongs to Tlalquequetzal, the vanilla orchid. You guess. You're wrong. She gives you the right one to taste. It's bitter. Very bitter. But the lesson sticks. By mid-afternoon, the fog has lifted. And the lake sparkles. You sit in the shade with Tia Xochitl, drinking a cool brew of maize water and crushed basil. She speaks slowly now, telling stories. Of a boy who once swallowed a frog whole and had hiccups for a week. Of a woman who grew chilies so spicy that even the spirits avoided her doorstep. Of a healer who made herself invisible by rubbing cactus milk over her eyes. You're not sure which are jokes. But she doesn't laugh. She shows you her seed pouch, worn smooth from years of use. Inside, 1,000 futures. Some the size of a fingertip. Some so small you feel them only by sound. She gives you 5. Plant these near your willows. They like company. You promise you will. And then, as easily as you arrived, it's time to go. You paddle home slowly, the scent of herbs still clinging to your hands. You feel lighter somehow, not because your elbow hurts less, it still does, but because something in the air of that garden reset. The day. Back at your Chinampa, you plant the seeds she gave you in a small, respectful circle. You don't know their names. You don't need to. You pour water gently into the soil and whisper. Something, anything. Not a prayer. Just a presence. And as the sun sets, golden through the willow branches, you sip a warm cup of herbal tea from your own clay gourd and feel the medicine working. Not just in your body. In the earth beneath you. The morning greets you with the distant thump of drums, soft, steady, and unmistakably ceremonial. You stir from your hammock and stretch toward the sound, which echoes faintly across the lake from the grand temples of Tenochtitlan. Today is no ordinary day. It's the festival of the flowers. You'd nearly forgotten. Not that the Chinampa lets you forget for long. Your marigolds are blooming all at once, a riot of gold and orange, each one reaching up like it's trying to outshine the sun. The air smells of petals and lake mist. The kind of scent that makes you pause mid-breath. This festival isn't about gods that demand blood. Not today. Today, the offerings are flowers. Songs. Feathers. Laughter. Even the ducks seem more festive, though they're mostly just stealing petals. You begin with harvest only the best blooms. The ones with full faces and the deepest color. You gently twist them from their stems, collecting them in a woven basket that's still damp from the morning dew. The marigolds go first. Then morning glories, with their trumpet-shaped elegance. Then the delicate xochitl, their petals thin as breath. Historians agree that flower festivals were among the most elaborate and widely celebrated events in Aztec society. They were more than pretty parades. They were political theater. Community bonding, spiritual devotion, and garden competition all rolled into one. By mid-morning, the canals are alive with color. Canoes decked out in woven flags and garlands glide by, steered by laughing children and flower-laden elders alike. Some boats carry musicians with flutes and rattles. Others carry dancers, their faces painted in gentle patterns instead of war paint. You decorate your canoe with a ring of morning glories and a fringe of dangling chili pods for flair, and maybe a little protection. Tepotson passes you, his entire canoe draped in woven mats of sunflowers and Kotlexakil, or serpent flowers. Going for the temple prize, you ask. Going for the priest's admiration, he grins. His daughter loves yellow. You join the flow, paddling slowly toward the main lake plaza. It's not stone or platform, it's just a wide, communal chinampa cleared for gatherings. Today, it's covered in mats, flowers, food bundles, and curious children. You dock your canoe and step ashore, offering your basket of blooms to a central altar ringed with obsidian. You add a sprig of basil for scent and a small carving of a maize kernel, just because it felt right. All around you, the festival hums. There's music everywhere, deep drums, bone flutes, reed whistles. The melodies don't match, exactly, but they overlap like layered wind. Dancers weave between baskets, their arms moving like petals on water. Some wear masks. Others wear only body paint and feathers. They are birds, flowers, clouds, gods. Someone hands you a drink, chocolate with chile. Frothy and bitter, served in a clay cup painted with vines. It tastes like morning thunder. You find a place beneath a willow and watch. The performances blend into one long movement. Offering bowls lifted skyward, songs sung in old dialects, flower garlands tossed into the water like soft prayers. Even the children take part, throwing petals into the air and shrieking with joy when they rain down on each other. You help serve food, tortillas wrapped around squash blossoms, tamales dyed pink with beetroot, and corn cakes shaped like suns. You eat slowly, letting each bite linger. And at some point, you realize something. This isn't a break from Chinampa life. This is Chinampa life. The flowers, the food, the people, the canoes, the laughter, all of it floats on the same system that gives you squash and mosquitoes. There's no separation. No weekend and weekday. No work and rest. It all folds together. And this folding? It's what makes it all bearable. Sacred. Sane. Because if you're going to work the soil by hand and wrestle ducks for your chilies, you might as well dance once in a while. The afternoon slips by in a shimmer of color and music. Eventually, the altar is completely buried in blossoms, like it's been swallowed by the sun itself. Even the priest seems softened, smiling more than frowning. There are no sacrifices today, just the gentle promise of abundance, and the community that makes it possible. You paddle home slowly, trailing marigold petals behind you like a floating bouquet. Back on your chinampa, you place the last few flowers in the corners of your plot. Not for the gods. Just for the soil. A quiet thank you. You lie down in your hammock, limbs heavy from dancing and squash cake. Above you, the willow sways. And in the distance, the drums continue. Softer now. Slower. Like a heartbeat falling asleep. The morning after the Festival of the Flowers feels like waking up inside a painting that's still drying. The air smells faintly of wilted petals, damp corn husks, and smoke from 100 little fires that have now gone out. Your chinampa is quiet, contemplative, almost shy. The marigold garlands have drooped but not yet let go. And your canoe still wears its fringe of morning glories like yesterday's party hat. You rise slowly, your limbs aching in places you didn't know could ache. Apparently, dancing barefoot on a floating garden isn't a low-impact activity. Today feels like a day of aftercare, not just for your muscles, but for the garden itself. Celebrations are beautiful, but they always leave a bit of a mess. You begin with a slow walk through your rows, checking each plant. The squash vines are fine, resilient as ever. The beans look smug, as if they skipped the party entirely. The amaranth, however, seems a little stunned. Perhaps too much foot traffic or too much flute playing nearby. You start tidying. Fallen petals are gathered, not wasted, but tossed gently into the compost pile. A few crushed leaves are trimmed. Stray bits of food wrappers made from corn husk are pulled from the water. Nothing is left to rot. Because in the chinampa world, nothing truly goes to waste. You pull the garlands from your canoe, pressing the still fragrant flowers into the mulch bed near the willows. Let them become something new. Let them sink, soften, and rise again in root form. As you work, you think about the invisible systems of renewal at play here. The Aztecs understood something modern folks still struggle with: growth is not constant. It's cyclical. Plant, harvest, rest. Dance, feast, clean. Even the gods took breaks between battles. Historians note that the post-festival days in the Aztec calendar were considered liminal, soft days, between intentions. Not quite sacred, not quite mundane. A pause. A stretch. A reset. And so you reset. You reweave a corner mat, sagging after someone, possibly Tapatsan, possibly a duck, stepped through it during the flower parade. You clean your tools, rubbing the obsidian blades with river sand until they shine again. You restring your paddle handle with new cord. Each action says, I'm still here. And I still care. You take time today to check on the vermiculture basket you tucked behind the reeds weeks ago, a little experimental idea passed down from a neighbor. Inside? Wigglers. Dozens of small, fat worms, happily eating rotted leaves and turning them into nutrient-rich magic. You scoop a bit of their castings and sprinkle it along your chili rows. They don't complain. You whisper a thank you. In the afternoon, the wind picks up slightly. And you notice the canal water has turned a little cloudy. Not dangerous, just unsettled. A perfect time to check your underwater reed anchors. You slip into the cool water, holding your breath, and feel along the sides of the chinampa with practiced fingers. The reed bundles are mostly solid, but one has loosened. You adjust it, rewrap it with fiber, and resurface with a gasp and a triumphant splash. And just like that, you've helped your garden hold on a little tighter. You paddle out briefly to visit the communal chinampa again. It, too, is quiet today, flowerless. Still swept clean from the festival, with only a few baskets of leftover tamales shared among the older children who've been sent for post-celebration cleaning duty. One of them offers you a half-wilted flower crown. You accept it and wear it with pride. Tapatsan floats by in a canoe full of ash. Spreading it on my squash, he calls. Helps keep the beetles away. Or at least gives them something to think about. You nod. Ash is a farmer's secret here, mildly alkaline, full of minerals, and a gentle way to discourage pests. You ask for a handful, and he tosses you a gourdful. Back at your own chinampa, you dust the ash between your rows like seasoning. Not too much. Just enough for the plants to know they're still being watched over. And then you rest. You lie in your hammock, the flower crown slipping down over your eyes. The wind smells of willow bark and damp earth. Somewhere nearby, a reed flute plays, slow, low, and off-key, but honest. Your hands are stained green again. Your knees are muddy. Your back is sore. But your heart? Your heart is light. Because tending a chinampa isn't just about planting things. It's about noticing things. Listening to what bends. Watching what bounces back. Accepting the rhythm of work, celebration, and repair. Even gods need rest days. And so, you close your eyes beneath the nodding willow, flower crown askew, and let the chinampa hold you, not as a farmer, not as a host, but simply as one more thing that belongs here. You awaken to a subtle shift in the air, not a breeze, not a sound exactly, but a change. Something has turned. You sit up slowly and scan your chinampa. The light is different today, thinner. Sharper. The warmth you've grown used to is still there, but it hides beneath a thin veil of coolness. You exhale and see it, your breath, visible for the first time in many moons. Autumn has arrived. Of course, the Aztecs didn't divide the year into the same neat four-season boxes you might know. Instead, they observed cycles of rain and dryness. Warmth and harvest, festival and fasting. But even here, on your floating garden in the center of the world, change is felt first in the soil. You kneel down and press your fingers into the chinampa. It's still damp, still rich, but the consistency has shifted, less sponge, more pudding. You know this texture. It's the sign that slower growth is coming. You don't panic. The chinampa doesn't either. Today is a day for transition, easing the garden into its gentler season. Not with fanfare, but with attentiveness. You begin by walking the rows. The squash has started to yellow at the tips. The chili bushes are dropping a few more leaves than usual. The beans, well, they always try to pretend nothing changes, but even they look tired around the edges. You nod to each one. No judgment. Just observation. You start with pruning. Not harsh cuts, just gentle trimming, removing the dying to let the living breathe. The garden exhales with every snip. It's not sadness. It's preparation. Historians still wonder how the Aztecs managed to produce such a staggering amount of food year-round without overworking. Their soil. The answer, in part, is observation over obsession. The chinampa teaches you when to pull back. When to let it sleep a little. When to trade intensity for intention. You kneel by your amaranth patch and gather the last usable leaves. The stalks are woody now, less generous. That's fine. You thank them with a small offering of water and place a few flower petals at their base. Not as fertilizer, just as kindness. Later, you dig into your seed pouch, the one gifted by Tia Xochitl, and pull out a few small treasures saved for this moment. Winter herbs, ones that thrive in cooler air and slower light. Cacahuatl, quailite, miltimate. You press them into small cleared sections, working quietly, whispering not because you're superstitious, but because this moment feels like it deserves a hush. After planting, you gather the dying vines, but you don't burn them or toss them into the canal. You layer them gently across the beds, a blanket of dried green that will break down into warmth and food for the soil itself. Mulch, yes, but also memory. Let the garden sleep under its own history. By midday, the sunlight has thinned even more. You fetch your thicker cloak, a reed-woven poncho, lined with duck feathers, and wrap it around your shoulders. You sit by the edge, watching the light ripple across the canals. Even the ducks seem quieter today. You paddle over to the communal chinampa and find a few others already doing their autumn rituals, laying new mulch, reinforcing walkways, building small windbreakers from cane. You help tie one in place, laughing as the wind tries to knock it over before it's even finished. Someone starts singing, not a festival song, but a work song, soft and rhythmic, about a tired sun, a lazy moon, and corn that dreams beneath the frost. You return to your chinampa and finish the day with seed care. You sit by your willow, gently cracking open dried pods and sorting the seeds into gourd bowls, one for eating, one for storing, one for sharing. You run your fingers through them, smooth, warm, and whispery. They feel like secrets. You tuck them into a pouch and bury it partway in the earth, beneath a stone. Not to hide them. Just to let them rest. And finally, as the sky fades into gray and your garden curls into itself like a sleepy cat, you brew a small pot of spiced atoll. You sip slowly, steam rising in thin lines. You add a few last petals to your compost, then sit beside it with a full belly and empty hands. Nothing more is needed tonight. Because autumn on the Chinampa isn't about loss. It's about letting go with care. About preparing the roots, trusting the quiet, and remembering that beneath every fallen leaf, something is already beginning again. The air is cool but still, and your breath mingles with the mist curling over the canal. As you stand on the edge of your Chinampa, wrapped in your reed cloak, you hear only the occasional plop of a fish, the rustle of drying corn leaves, and your own heartbeat, soft, steady, present. It's the season of stillness. And the Chinampa seems to be exhaling one long, peaceful breath. You begin your morning by walking the perimeter, not out of necessity, but because it feels right. The water is calm, mirroring the sky with eerie perfection. Even the ducks seem reluctant to break the surface today. One floats nearby like a feathered boat, watching you with sleepy disinterest. You check the newly sown winter herbs, tiny green shoots now just poking through the mulch. The quolites are first, as usual. Always eager. They look absurdly optimistic, faces turned skyward like hopeful acolytes. You touch one gently with your fingertip. Good luck, you whisper. Today's work isn't physical. It's mental maintenance. It's the kind of day when the soil does most of the work on its own, and so do you. You sit by the willow tree with your garden journal, a bark paper booklet tied with reed string. Not for trade. Not for priests. Just for you. You begin to write. Corn strong. Beans tired. Chili stubborn. Willows still holding. New herbs rising. Duck, smug. Your handwriting is uneven, your notes part poetry. Part complaint, part memory. You flip back through earlier pages, doodles of chili plants, a pressed marigold from Flower Festival Day, a smudge from the time you spilled amaranth paste in the margins. It's a messy archive. But it's yours. Historians argue whether Aztec Chinamperos kept formal records. Some say yes, especially those who supplied the markets or temples. Others believe oral memory ruled the gardens. You think both are true. You remember what your neighbor once said, the garden remembers if you do. You jot down today's temperature, cloud cover, and the pattern of migrating ducks. You sketch a nearby reed trap you built last week, labeling it works, but not for frogs. Then you sit back and let the sun warm your cheeks. As midday approaches, you decide to visit a small shrine on the edge of the lake, one you pass often but rarely stop at. It's not a temple, just a willow whose branches have been tied with offerings. Feathers, bits of pottery, tiny carvings, corn husks twisted into loops. You paddle out slowly, alone, the lake mirror still around you. At the shrine, you step out onto the narrow bank and kneel. There's no one else here. No priest. No ritual. Just quiet. You untie a thread of dried amaranth from your wrist and place it among the branches. You press your hand to the tree's bark and close. Your eyes, not to pray, but to listen. You hear wind in the reeds. Water slapping against a canoe. A far-off flute. And somewhere, underneath it all, the low pulse of the Chinampa, the lake itself. Living, pulsing, waiting. Back at your plot, you decide it's time to refresh your tool pouch. You sort through your implements, curved obsidian knife, reed binding cord, flattened trowel, hand-woven seed scoop. You sharpen your blade slowly against a smooth river stone, watching sparks flicker in the shade. You braid a new grip from corn husk. You oil the wood handle with a smear of chili oil, why not? Each tool, you realize, carries its own memory. The trowel is the one you dropped in the canal and retrieved only because a fish nudged it back toward shore. The knife once sliced a willow that bled sap like tears. The cord has tied hundreds of vines, but also one broken sandal. You roll the tools back into their pouch and hang them on a branch, shaded, safe. As dusk nears, you light a small fire and boil a pot of broth made from dried maize, greens, and crushed pumpkin seeds. It tastes earthy, simple, warm. You sit and sip slowly, writing one last note in your journal. Nothing grew today. But everything lived. You lay back on your reed mat, staring up through the willow canopy. The stars begin to emerge, one by one, as the mist returns to wrap the canals in silver. And you feel it, not the need to act, but the permission to rest. Because in this floating world, there is a time for planting. A time for harvesting. And a time for simply floating, with eyes open, while the water carries you quietly into tomorrow. You wake to the rhythmic slap of a paddle, steady, familiar, close. Peering out from your shelter, you see a small canoe approaching. Inside sits Yolittle, the weaver you helped on Reed Day. Her braids tied back, her face serious in the early light. She has something for you. As she docks, she lifts a carefully folded reed mat, the one you started and she helped you finish, though. Let's be honest, she did most of the rescuing. Now it's complete, it's pattern tight and even edged with chili-dyed thread. For your seeds, she says simply. You thank her. Not with words, but by making tea. You sit on opposite sides of the fire, steaming cups of spiced atoll between you. The lake unfolding in silence beyond the garden. There's no rush. The Chinampa doesn't believe in rush. After a while, she gestures toward the bundle. Soon it will be time. You nod. You both know what she means. It's almost dry season. In the Aztec world, this meant a subtle but certain change, not just in weather, but in focus. When planting slowed, making began. When fields rested, hands moved faster. This was the season of weaving, fixing, creating. And so today, you begin a new task, preparing your Chinampa for stillness, but not stagnation. You start by inspecting your seed stores. In gourd bowls and bark bundles, you sort the remnants of your harvest, striped bean seeds, pale maize kernels, black amaranth so fine it slips through your fingers like ash. You count them not by number, but by weight, color, promise. You place the most precious ones inside Yolittle's gift. The mat cradles them like a sleeping child. You roll it gently and tie it with reed cord. Not too tight. They need to breathe. Next, you repair your canoe, which has taken more than its fair share of scratches, collisions with stubborn turtles, and one unfortunate encounter with a drunken goose. You flip it over and smear it with a thick paste made from tree resin and ash. The mixture seals the cracks and smells like old fires. As you work, you hum, not a song, but a low, repetitive sound, the kind that makes work easier and thoughts softer. By midday, the sun is high and clear, casting crisp shadows through the willow leaves. You lie in one and begin weaving again, this time a reed screen to shade your seedlings during the hotter days. Ahead. Over under, twist, flatten, knot. You fall into rhythm. Time folds. You remember Yolittle's hands guiding yours, correcting a too tight braid, loosening a stubborn knot. You remember the girl who caught a frog and tried to teach it to swim in a basket. You remember the smell of flower garlands, the sound of drums, the priest's quiet nod when you offered nothing but marigolds. These memories live in your hands now. Later, you float gently through the canal to visit a floating tool exchange, a weekly ritual where Chinampas barter extra supplies, share repairs, or just gather to talk and tease. You trade a bundle of garlic shoots for a small woven fish trap. You admire a reed broom shaped like a bird. You give Tapatsan a hard time about his boat that is technically still floating and he throws a corn husk at you. It feels like family. You return home just as the wind begins to shift, cooler now, tinged with dust from the eastern hills. You hang your new screen above the amaranth bed and sit beneath it, watching the water come again. You retrieve your seed mat, unroll it carefully, and press your palm to the warm reed weave. Inside it are next year's dreams. Not all of them will grow. Some will mold. Some will vanish into the bellies of ducks. Some will flower too soon, or too late. But some will rise like miracles. And that's enough. That evening, you light a small lamp made from clay and river oil. Its flicker dances in the soft breeze, casting slow shadows on your mat, your seeds, your fingers. The Chinampa is nearly ready for rest. And so are you. Not idle. Not empty. Just waiting. Willing. Preparing the stillness where the next story will root. You don't rush the morning. There's no need. The garden's heartbeat has slowed, and so has yours. You stretch in the hammock, warm beneath your reed mat blanket. Listening to the chinampa wake up in fragments, a splash, a flutter, a low creak from the canoe as it shifts slightly with the current. It's a day for reflection. And the chinampa knows it. Everything around you seems to whisper, not urgently, but patiently, look around. You've done well. You rise and walk the rows slowly. The last of the herbs are flowering now, tiny bursts of green and purple and gold, defiant against the cooling air. A few hardy beans cling to the vines. Their pods wrinkled like old hands. The squash leaves have begun to curl, their job complete. You don't harvest today. You simply notice. You pause by your amaranth patch. A plant you once thought of as wild and unpredictable now stands tall and familiar. You run your fingers over its seed head, tiny grains falling into your palm like the hush of old stories. You smile. This patch gave you meals, offerings, laughter. It also once gave you a rash. You forgive it. You kneel beside the willow tree and feel its bark under your hands, textured, cool, steady. The same tree you tied your first hammock to. The one that shaded your fire during the big storm. The one with a nest, still hidden, still watched over by that same stubborn bird. Historians often try to define the success of chinampas by yields, engineering, square footage. But they forget the emotional geometry of it. The connections between fingers and leaf, between memory and mud, between effort and patience. You sit on the edge of your plot, legs dangling over the water. A turtle surfaces nearby, glances at you, and sinks again without fanfare. It's a moment like any other, and therefore perfect. You spend part of the morning repairing your journal. The bark paper has curled at the edges from moisture, so you press it between flat river stones. You write. This place grows more than food. It grows time. It grows quiet. You don't need to write more. Later, a canoe arrives, to Potson again, of course. This time with his daughter and 2 ducks tied gently at the feet, apparently part of a neighbor's runaway duck-sharing agreement gone wrong. You help them herd the waddling fugitives back into the canoe. Exchanging jokes about duck loyalty and which species is most likely to start a revolution. They bring tamales, and you share roasted chilies. No trade, just trust. You talk for a while about the season, about the dryness to come, about how their plot's been quieter since the heron stopped visiting. Before they leave, Tapotson hands you a small packet wrapped in banana leaf. Plant these when you're ready, he says. Or when the ducks tell you it's safe. The daughter adds, but not during rain. They hate being wet. You thank them, and paddle back to your plot with the packet resting carefully on your lap. Inside, a mix of seeds. Mystery seeds. Some round, some flat, one shaped like a tiny heart. You don't ask what they are. You'll find out when the time is right. As the sun begins to fall, casting gold on the water and tracing long shadows over your garden, you prepare your final chore, a symbolic clearing. Not destruction. Not uprooting. Just space. You clear a single row, remove the mulch, and let the soil breathe. No planting. Just exposure. The earth exhales through its pores. The air smells like stone and time. You sit by that bare row, hand on the soil, and whisper something not even you can define. It's not prayer. Not gratitude. More like a murmur. An echo of everything the chinampa has become. Above, the willows dance. Below, the water listens. And you floating, observing, alive realize you've done something few ever will. You've lived with the land, not on it. And the land remembers. The final morning arrives not with a bang, nor a festival, nor a duck demanding attention, but with a stillness so deep it feels like the lake is holding its breath. You wake before the sun crests the horizon, drawn by something quiet and ancient. The air is cool, crisp, and utterly motionless. Even the willows hold their leaves more tightly. You step outside barefoot, feeling the dampness of dew settle between your toes, and for a moment, you don't move. Because today is not for doing. It's for remembering. You sit by your favorite patch where the chilies once grew, where the mushrooms once popped up after the storm, where the coati came and overturned your compost. That patch, small and slightly uneven, holds more than vegetables. It holds story. You close your eyes, and the seasons unfold behind your eyelids. You see the first time you coaxed the squash vine onto the trellis. The time you caught a frog mid-jump and laughed for 3 whole minutes. You remember the smell of smoke during the pest fighting. Chili ritual. The priest who blessed your plot with marigold petals. The way your elbow ached after reed harvesting, but how good that tamale tasted afterward. You remember every duck invasion. Every canoe-side nap. Every awkward joke Tapatsan made. You remember the fish offering. The compost prayers. The floating festival where your marigolds made it all the way to the temple. Nestled in a canoe beside sunflowers in pride. You remember the silence after the storm, and how you rebuilt the reed edge with trembling fingers and stubborn hope. You stand now and walk the chinampa one last time, tracing the edges slowly, like drawing a memory into your muscles. You stop by the willow, now taller than you by far. Its roots gripping the chinampa with the confidence of an old friend. You touch its bark and speak its name, one you gave it secretly, months ago. It does not respond. But it doesn't have to. You untie your hammock and fold it carefully, tucking it into your canoe beside your tool pouch and seed mat. The canoe barely rocks today, even the water agrees it's time. But before you go, you place one thing in the center of your chinampa. A small stone. Smooth. Warm from your hand. Unmarked. A quiet signature that says, I was here. Not to claim, but to witness. As you push off into the canal, the water parts gently. The chinampa doesn't vanish behind you. It just waits, knowing it will hold its next caretaker just as surely. You paddle slowly, silently, past familiar reeds, over forgotten roots, past the shrine tree wrapped in offerings from hands you never met. The lake glimmers. The city of Tenochtitlan blinks in the distance. And in your canoe, curled inside the reed mat, bundled with thread and time, are your seeds. Wrapped tight in the memories of mud and sun and the soft beat of distant drums. They carry the weight of stories. They carry you. Wind down. So now, as the last ripples smooth themselves across the lake, and the chinampa fades behind mist and memory, you find yourself floating, gently, between sleep and waking. Let your breath match the hush of the water. Let your thoughts fall like petals, slow, soft, and without direction. The stories have been planted. The earth is resting. And so can you. Nothing more to fix. Nothing more to gather. Just the faint scent of marigold, the rhythm of willow leaves in the wind, and the peace of a floating garden that never asked you to. Hurry. Let it hold you now. Let the lake carry you just a little further. Just a little softer. Sleep well. End of script. Sweet dreams.